It is Wednesday the 25th. I want to welcome everybody to the Housing Community and Economic Development Committee. I'm Herb Weston, the chair. At this point in time, we do not have a quorum, so we'll move forward in the action that is taken unless we do get a quorum, and it's my understanding that we probably will not, will be a communique or a communication from the chair. Okay, so with that said, I have no cards from the public at this time. Mr. City Attorney, I want to go directly into some of the non-controversial items that I intend to move quickly. So with that, Ms. Barclay, let's, and I've just been joined by my colleague, Tony Cardenas. So with that said, Ms. Barclay, if you could read, we'll go items 1 through 5, starting with 5, and then we'll go backwards. No, starting with item 1. Let's start with item 1.
Good morning, Meg Barkley with the CLA's office. Item 1 is a report from the Los Angeles Housing Department and the City Administrative Officer relative to funds for the lead hazard remediation program through fiscal year 2008-2009.
Okay, then we will adopt the CAO report. Item 2.
Item 2 are reports from the CDD and the CAO relative to the USC Radiology and Associates.
Okay, then on item 2, we'll adopt the CAO's report as well. Item 3.
Item 3 are reports from CDD and the CAO relative to the approval of recommendations for financial advisors to the City and the Industrial Development Authority.
Okay, item 3. Oh, was there a question, Mr. Carter? Okay, on item 3, we'll adopt that as a, we'll adopt the CAO report. Item 4.
Item 4 is a motion, Labange Garcetti et al., relative to potential incentives, programs, and funding sources that would support and reduce costs for the film and television industry.
Okay, then we will adopt that motion. Item 5.
Item 5 is a motion, Smith Zine Rosendahl, relative to creating a substantial framework that would require owners and banks to maintain foreclosed properties in order to avoid deterioration of neighborhoods.
Okay, let's put item 5 aside. Mr. Cardenas has some questions where it relates to that issue. On item 6, read the issue, but we will continue item 6.
Okay. Item 6 is a motion, Perry Garcetti, relative to amending Council's action of May 6th relative to the residential hotels demolition and conversion ordinance.
Okay, so on items 1 through 4, we will move those as a communique from the chair. Item 6, we will continue. Item 5, Mr. Cardenas has some questions. Are there representatives here that would be in a position to answer these questions? Or why don't you ask the questions and let's see if we can get somebody who can answer those for you, Mr. Cardenas.
Thank you.
Basically, what we were going to do to this was hold this in community and ask for some additional work to be done on this.
That's item 5?
On item 5.
That's fine. I'll hold my questions for the next time we have it.
What we were going to do is hold the motion in committee and direct the department and the CLA to convene a task force and to report back to this committee in between 60 and 90 days.
Okay, I just want them to be prepared to answer questions on what the day-to-day activities would likely be with this new, I guess, Building and Safety Task Force.
So then the city clerk then, or would it be you, Ms. Barclay, that would make sure that language was added so that in the directive that we're giving them, if you could add Mr. Cardenas's concerns so when they come back they can answer any and every question where it relates to was it the day-to-day operation?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir. I believe that the directive is for the Department of Building and Safety to form the task force. We can coordinate with them and make sure all the committee concerns are addressed.
Thank you.
Okay, then that will bring us to items 7, A, B, and C, which is the big one for today. So read that item, and it would appear that usually once we go through all of our items and we only have one left, that this room is not packed. So since this room is packed, I would think that Cecilia brought the her entire entourage with her today. That's what I think, but I'm not sure. Read item 7.
Would you like me to read all three?
Yeah, let's read all 3.
Item 7A is the report from the Community Redevelopment Agency, the CAO, and the CLA relative to the CRA's 2008-2009 proposed budget. Item 7B is CRA reports relative to amendments to the 2007-2008 budget, pending submission of the actual 2006-2007 carryover amount, and the mid-year status of fiscal year 2007-2008. And 7C is a motion Alarcon et al. Relative to various actions concerning the Hometown Heroes homeownership program. And the CAO-CLA report has been submitted to the clerk.
Okay.
Hi, Lisa Johnson-Smith of the City Administrative Officer. Before you is a budget that's composed of $726.3 million. The way the agency does their budget is a multi-year program. So the first year work program is $621.9 million, with the remainder going into $104.4 million going into the future year program. Of that amount, $53 million is allocated towards the operating budget. The agency also has budget is comprised of first-year resources or new resources, which is $355 million, or 49% of the budget, and carryover from the prior year, which is $371 million, or 51% of their budget. For the last 2 years, the budget has been presented in a new budget format. What the agency has done is they have condensed their prior format, which was 3 budgets, into 1 budget. And they did that to increase their transparency and also to be more reflective of what the city's budget looks like. And they were working on cost allocation, so they wanted to allocate their regional administrative staff as well as their central office staff and show more of how the costs are spread. What we asked for last year was that they provide more schedules as a supplement. What the agency has suggested instead is that they provide certain budget schedules through us that are numerical, as well as giving us a copy of their quarterly reports, which outlines progress that they make every quarter. And so we're looking at that right now and considering if that would be sufficient for our purposes. If you look at the agency's new resources, the agency's new resources increased by $71.6 million. And the new resources were primarily from 2 sources: tax increment receipts and proceeds from tax increment backed debt. The agency's projected expenditure is $212 million for affordable housing, $74 million for economic development, $91 million for financial public improvements, and another category of $127 million for what the agency calls their other work program, and that includes development opportunities, public art, and strategic planning. The agency's debt service fund is $137 million. For the operating budget, the agency has not increased their staffing, so they increased their operating budget by almost $2 million. Last year was proposed at $51 million. This year was proposed at $53 million. The agency has Assembly Bill 1290 funds. This year, their new projections and new revenues is $99.4 million. They have a total of $27.6 million for fiscal year 08-09, and out of that amount, $18.2 million is in carryover funds. In addition, for their mid-year, the agency did not do a 2007-08 mid-year report. What they did instead was a status report. So they had $15.4 million that was carried over from their 06-07 to their 07-08 budget. The agency provided the CAO and the CLA monthly status reports, and they have already amended their 07-08 budget to reflect the carryover amount. What we requested and what we normally used to seeing is a carryover report. So we have made a recommendation for the agency to do a carryover report for their 2008-09 budget by October 31st, 2008. We recommend that the budget before you, which is $726 million, it was amended to increase $2.2 million in additional funds from land acquisition monies. So the actual budget would be $728.5 million be approved.
Ivani Salvaro with the CLA's office. Relative to the new initiatives from the CRA that are before you in their budget, the first is the Workforce Housing Innovation Fund. This fund, was not detailed thoroughly in the budget as such. We have received some information from the CRA subsequent to the release of their budget. And also, and Mr. Alarcon has introduced a motion for the Hometown Heroes program in the East Valley, which will be part of this initiative. This is approximately $12 million. Again, $5 million will be for this Hometown Heroes program. $5 million approximately for the East Valley region, which will have a home ownership assistance program, as well as $500,000 for a pilot program in the East Side region. 1.5 will also be for a neighborhood facade program in the South LA. Since these programs are not delineated in the budget, we do request that the CRA report back on this fund and provide us a status report once these programs are finalized and have been thoroughly reviewed. A new program, again, is the New Generation Fund. At this point, the agency, as I understand, Cecilia can help me out, but the agency will be part of this program although at this point I don't know if we know that it'll be a $7 million contribution, but the funding source has not been confirmed yet, or as I'm told, I think there will be either Bunker Hill replacement funds and Adelante East Side Trust Fund.
Also, actually, some West Valley housing funds is anticipated. So it's mostly going to be West Valley as well as downtown housing funds.
Again, as a result, we asked the CRA to report back on once they have the finalized budgets for these two programs. As part of the city budget, there was also 8% that was allocated to new initiatives for the city and the infrastructure fund. Again, these are not delineated in the budget per se, but they are reviewed within each project area where it made sense that the CRA would contribute to these public improvements they have. So that is included in the individual schedules for each project area. Again, relative to the land acquisition fund, there is an additional $2.2 million this year for a total of $18.3 million for the land acquisition fund. We are requesting that relative to how the CRA is working with the working group at this point, we do request that that the working group, once the CRA has decided they would like to fund a project from the land acquisition fund, that they come to the working group closer to when they go to the board, so that there's not a large gap between when the working group reviews the project and when it goes to the board, and these projects don't change, because we're finding that may happen at this point, and I think that's something the CRA understands and would be agreeable to. Again, the land acquisition fund was only for a 2-year period. This means that next year we would not have the land acquisition fund. So we are asking that the CRA, and along with the land acquisition fund, evaluate the program and make recommendations about the success of the program and whether or not we should continue this program for next year. That's basically the recommendations that are new to the CRA and the land acquisition fund. Any questions we have?
Now, I do have a question that I want to ask Cecilia to speak. I know it's early, but what are your thoughts where it relates to the land acquisition fund?
We think it's been very successful, and again, part of it depends on what happens with the state budget. If we get a huge hit with the state budget, then we might have to reassess. But as it stands now, we've seen the acquisition fund infuse significant capital into places like South Los Angeles that wouldn't otherwise have a funding source to acquire land. It is literally jump-starting projects that have been stalled in some cases for 15 years. So we think it's been a very useful tool. We think we've worked pretty collaboratively with the task force. It's been actually helpful to have the CLA and CAO be more engaged in our projects and understand the need for acquisition dollars. So as it stands now, we are more than happy to provide an evaluation in 180 days, and it's my expectation that unless barring some calamity at the state where they try to raid a lot of money from us, we would recommend continuing the acquisition fund.
Okay, but still, I mean, in your opinion, you believe that the fund has been successful,
Yes, I do.
and we have no control over what the state does.
That's correct.
So even if we do take a state hit, that does not mean there was a failure by the acquisition fund, which, I mean, basically what that means, we might have to slow something down, but I would anticipate that you would recommend that we continue with this. I mean, you know, hopefully we won't be in such dire straits all of the time. So I just, you know, because personally, I was pleased with the land acquisition fund.
Right.
And it would appear to me that it has been successful. And in no way, if the state takes the money away, is that a fault of the fund or those who oversee the fund.
I appreciate
so anyway,
that.
With that said, I don't know if you have a presentation you want to go through.
We presented at the last hearing, and we don't want to take your time. We know how busy you are, and you have another item on the agenda. One clarification I did want to make on the public improvement, the 8% set aside, and I think Ivania did state it. We basically set it aside in every project area budget, and then we've been working very, very closely with the Public Works Department on identifying line items, what particular project, and that's an ongoing discussion with them, because we have to match our geography to their capital improvement budget, figure out what's not being funded through the general fund, and then backfill with CRA's money. And it's a tedious process, but we think it's the right way to go, because we need to work directly with the department. And so we have a blanket co-op agreement with Public Works, with a number of the bureaus, and that's how we intend to expend it, by identifying additional specific line items, and of course we'll be working very closely with the council offices for those districts and those project areas to accelerate those projects that you think are the most important.
You referenced that that it's been helpful, and I can't remember if that was the word you used, working with the CAO's office and the CLA's office more closely. Has this a different approach, or?
No, not at all. I mean, I think it's it's been good to have the two departments involved in our acquisitions and understanding how fast these projects have to move. And I think that the CLA's recommendation that we come forward, if something stalls, what we let them know, is an excellent one. In particular, the reason why we're rolling over 2.2 this year is that the Enterprise Housing Opportunities Program, the EHOP program, that had received an allocation, everything changed in the market with the mortgage meltdown mess. And so they backed away from the program. They basically shut down EHOP. And I think having those regular check-ins where we say, here's what's going out in the community, here's what's actually happening in the market, could be helpful for the CLA and the CAO and for us as well.
Do you guys have anything that you want to say in closing before I allow Mr. Cardenas to ask some questions? Okay, Mr. Cardenas.
Thank you. Several different matters I want to get clarification on. The land acquisition fund, how long has it been in existence?
This was the first year. This fiscal year that's closing
That
is
we're
the first year.
currently in.
Yeah, and so next year, FY 0809 would be the second year.
And how much money has accumulated to the land acquisition fund?
There was 23 million last year, and we're carrying over 2.2 this year. This year was started at 16, so it's going to be 18.2. Did I get that right? 18.2 total.
Yeah.
So come July 1, there'll be about 18.2 million?
Correct.
Okay. So how much was expended in this first year?
23 minus 2.2, 20. I'm sorry.
About 20, close to 22 million.
22 million? And how does that break out? I mean, as far as project-wise or geographically, where was that 22 million invested?
Yeah, we had a report back on that.
Yeah.
Remember it offhand?
About 70 to 80% of it was in the greater South LA region. And then the remainder of it touched,
The harbor, Westlake, there was a project down in the harbor that was acquisition of industrial land. There was the Westlake Theater acquisition. We had $4 million that we intended to spend in the east side for a project, the Coffee Bean headquarters, and then that fell through. So then we brought it back to the committee, reprogrammed that money for additional uses. But that was the general breakdown.
And we're anticipating that this fund will be a 2-year fund, and then after those 2 years, then what happens?
Well, the council's approval of our budget last year, the recommendation from the CLA and the CAO is that you authorize it for 2 years. So now we're midway. If you approve our budget, we'll be in the second year. And we would probably recommend, in 6 months, as the CLA's asked us for a proposal, we would recommend continuing the acquisition fund. And we think it's a fund that should probably be continued on an indefinite basis. And that this concept of having a flexible pool of money to be able to use to act quickly to acquire land, I think is very, very useful for the city's economic development strategy.
Now, how much was expended? About 22 million so far?
22 million.
Of that, how much of that breaks down to commercial and/or industrial or housing use?
I don't think we've done that analysis, but just from memory, I would say that most of it has gone to mixed use or affordable housing. There may be about somewhere between 2 to 4 million that went in more industrial projects, like the harbor was an industrial project. But most of the other projects have been acquisitions for a mix of uses or, I'm sorry, no, that's wrong, because both Marlton Square and Vermont Manchester are commercial projects. So I would say then, and that's about 6, so it could be about half the fund that went to commercial and industrial. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was
Cecilia,
yeah.
just to jump in, Mr.
Yeah.
Carpenter, could you
We can certainly make a report on that.
Or whatever, and CC.
And I think we would
myself and send it directly
break
to
it down
Mr. Carpenter's.
by strictly housing, mixed use, strictly commercial, and then strictly industrial, because mixed use is predominant in this way.
Yeah, because one of the things that's important for me to understand, being that I have areas that will hopefully be involved in utilizing some of these funds in the coming year, I want to make sure that I understand what seems to be the trend of what the dollars are being used for, what seems to be the logical purpose for those dollars. They don't seem to be restricted for one particular use.
No, absolutely not.
But I'd like to see what the trend is on that.
And I think the other point is we want it to be as flexible as possible to respond to opportunities. That's the notion, that as much as we can in a government entity, be able to quickly move on opportunities that arise. So we want to keep it flexible if possible.
Also, have any of these funds been used to acquire property, and then where other monies are found, it's been replenished?
Yeah, the Westlake Theater in particular already repaid its $1 million allocation because other monies became available.
And
then
the documents were written on a short-term basis, or that just fortunately that's just the way it works?
That was the intent. Each one of the acquisitions has to do an analysis on what is its project readiness, on its chances of repayment, how much do we think it can be repaid, and are there other funds available to do the project. What we try to do is keep the portfolio balanced between those that have a lower likelihood of repayment and those that are likely to be repaid. And so we rate them from 1 to 5 on repayment probability and try to keep it around 3 overall the portfolio.
Okay. And now,
And do you want to add anything to that, Ivania?
Only to the extent that, Mr. Cardenas, so we are expecting in July a quarterly report from the CRA that we have asked all these questions that are along the lines that you have asked relative to the status of each project, whether or not it was a grant, whether it was a loan, the type of the structure of the bill of the funds, where we are on that particular repayment, and et cetera, et cetera. And we're expecting that to come as part of their July quarterly report on the land acquisition fund. So definitely, we will be having that report back that details each of these projects again. And on top of that, how each project is chosen internally and evaluated at the CRA staff management level. And what the scope is of all the projects that they're evaluating from, because that is one detail that we don't have. We don't know what the universe is of the projects that are eligible for these funds, and we'd like to understand it on our side a little bit more about how these programs are chosen and these projects for funding be chosen. So again, hopefully in the quarterly report, or if you can get it for council, that would be.
and when do you anticipate having that report?
I think it's done. I mean, we
So
in terms of the criteria, we've been completely open about it. There's a very specific set of criteria, and so it's just a matter of compiling it in terms of what Ivania said, repayment, where each project is.
So that report will be ready for presentation sometime in July?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. It'll involve a lot of the questions I have. The hometown heroes, now when it comes to housing laws and discrimination laws and things of that nature, are we afforded the opportunity to grant assistance or public dollars based on employment categories?
Councilman, the matter continues.
Could you identify
to be-
yourself?
Excuse me. Margarita Descontrillas, East Valley Regional Administrator. The issue regarding source of income for specific targeted groups continues to be a matter of concern that remains unresolved at this point.
So it remains unresolved, meaning that whatever statute is silent on that point. Secondly, the courts haven't determined definitively, I guess at the highest courts, whether or not we can do that or not.
That is correct, Councilman. Currently, the cities of San Francisco, Long Beach, and other jurisdictions throughout the state of California do have a targeted program specifically for firefighters, EMTs, and other professional
Police officers,
safety
et cetera.
officers. Correct.
And any challenges in court right now, or we're just wondering or hoping that?
Not that we're aware of, but I'm checking with San Diego Fair Housing Council. It's my understanding that they have had a case pending.
Oh, okay. All right. So, but as of right now,
I don't
as
believe
far
there's
as-
any published decision barring this type of occupational targeting.
Okay. All right. Now, in the presentation from the CAO, you mentioned $7 million in and around $5 million for hometown heroes, and then you said something about $1.5 million and $500,000 at the beginning of your presentation.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That was yes, CLA's office. Again, this is relative to the Workforce Housing Initiative Fund. And there was a total of $12 million identified in the CRA budget for this new initiative. At the time the budget was released, there was no detail yet as to how this program would work. So we are anticipating that some of these projects will be coming forward individually, and when they do, we're just asking that they report back. The only one that we have before us is that we know that it's part of this program is the Hometown Heroes, and that's why.
And let me
that's why there's that motion. I'm sorry,
Right.
from
And
Mr.
I'll-
Alarcon.
Allow me to clarify, Councilman Cardenas. I think we set aside $12 million for the so-called Innovative Housing Fund, and it's vague. I mean, the idea is that we want to have some innovative approaches to trying to target workforce housing and not just our typical 20% set aside for affordable housing as defined by the law, by the community redevelopment law. So as you know, we've been working with your office on an additional $5 million targeting more workforce housing at different levels. It looks a little bit like the Hometown Heroes program, but it's going to be targeted, again, working with the specific needs of your district. And then we anticipate a similar program coming to bear out of perhaps the West Valley, and then the East Side has already set aside about $500,000 for a homeownership program as well. Altogether, it will come out to about $12 million, but most of that money is targeted to the Valley. And what we wanted to do, again, is to keep it flexible to reflect the particular needs and community character of each of the project areas. We didn't want to have one blanket program for the entire agency. It didn't seem to make sense to us.
Okay. The last time we talked about the CRA budget, you mentioned your ability to figure out how to keep the total positions down to 270.
Correct.
Without increasing them, and being creative on how to make sure that as many of the factions of responsibilities that your department has are being met, and being able to keep up with demand. And one of the questions I asked was that it seems like in this coming budget year, certain project areas are going to be fortified, but you mentioned that in the current budget year or in previous budget years, you were able to address personnel matters in other project areas. And I was looking forward to seeing how that's balanced out as far as the overall picture of CRA and you feeling comfortable with your department and having the right kind of balance with personnel.
Right. In terms of the specific areas that in the last year's budget, we received authorization and we significantly enhanced staffing in the East Valley. We have now gone through the hiring process and are almost completely staffed. We've pretty much kept the allocation among regions and central office the same as the budget that was approved last year. There may be a few minor tweaks. I don't think there was actually a net change from regions versus central with a net gain in central. I think it balances out. And Yvonne, I think we may have just given you...
Attachment 12, it shows where the positions were moved around. There was a decrease in 2 positions in the regional offices, and 1 position, increase in 1 position in technical support and 1 in business operations.
Right.
So, yeah.
And it was for housing, to beef up the housing department, and that's it, right?
Yeah.
Housing, and to also, and part of that was to get more Prop 1C money.
Okay. So, this attachment actually shows from 05-06 budget year through 06-07, 07-08, 08-09?
Yes, it shows 4 years.
4 years. Okay. Now,
If it's accurate.
Cecilia, you haven't been with CRA for the whole 4 years.
Absolutely not. 2 years.
So the question to you, since you're the head of the entire department, how do you feel about the trend and the stabilization of all of these positions as it stands right now for the coming budget year? Are you pretty much, I mean, nothing is static and as stagnant as,
Right.
It's not like it's going to stay exactly this. But in essence, is this the kind of formula, the kind of personnel distribution that you feel is 90+% there, 95, 99% there? I mean, where
Yes.
are we at when it comes to stabilizing where we think we should be with personnel in all of the various areas?
For certainly this fiscal year, and I would imagine for next fiscal year, given the potential threats from the state budget, I think we're about where we need to be. I mean, I want to be fiscally prudent about this. I wouldn't want to add anywhere. In terms of distribution within the 270, I think we have it about right. The regions or the project areas that have the resources, have the staff, we've really tried to pare down in regions that aren't generating tax increment so that it's lean, it's not overstaffed, and therefore other regions aren't subsidizing them. That's the purpose of the acquisition fund, is to be subsidizing projects, not people. And so I think we have it just about right. I don't know that we'd make very many changes in next year for the allocation among regions between central and regional. I think it's probably going to stay about the same unless something significantly changes at the state level, and then everybody's going to need to take a hit.
Okay. Now, one of the things that tends to be the faces and the names that the council offices tend to interact with the most are the regional offices.
Correct.
And across the regional offices, it looks like you have 104 positions, which seem to be, at least categorically, the largest component. How about that balance between the regional offices and all the other responsibilities?
I think we're about right. I really do. I mean, I think within the central office, we may, depending on how we're doing on things like compliance and monitoring, move the boxes around within the technical support in central office. But as between region and central, I think we have it about right.
Okay. Now, can you remind us what authority the state of California has if they want to abuse their authority and power when it comes to redevelopment dollars, and how that would affect us if they were to get aggressive about that?
In years past, when the state, and you would probably know this better than I do as the former chair of the Budget Committee, but in years past when there have been tight budget situations in the state has used the ERAF and basically put out a call to redevelopment agencies up and down the state and just taken off the top an amount of money. So if they need $1 billion to fill a hole, they'll say we need $1 billion out of redevelopment agencies, and then they apportion that across every redevelopment agency in the state depending on how much tax increment is generated. And that's taken right off the top of the tax increment rolls. The current proposal that's been floated by the Legislative Analyst's Office is to take 5% off of the top of tax increment for this year and for the next 5 years. Did I miss anything, Brent? That's pretty much it. I'm not sure where that's going. I mean, there's
Now,
been
now that
discussion.
5% would, have we analyzed how much impact we would have if that 5% were to
It would be
take
about
place?
$11.6 million.
11.6.
If you look on
09.
page 26, there's a chart that shows you each dollar amount for each fiscal year. So it's about 11.5 million in 2008-09, 12 million, 12 million, 12 million, and then 13 million.
So,
You've just proportionally taken it, we've just taken it off the distribution.
so technically, which categorical funds would mostly be affected by that? Or we would just have an internal adjustment, internally, how we would adjust those dollars?
I think what the agency's done in the past is they've reviewed their budget and they've looked to see which project areas that they can take the money from in order to distribute the dollars in somewhat a manner to meet the dollar amount from the state.
So now their decision would be on a gross basis as far as we see it, and then we would have to internalize how we're going to budget that money back out.
That's correct.
So the budget that we're looking at right now is assuming that the state of California will allow us to have the dollars that should be coming to us.
That's correct. It doesn't assume the 5% cutoff. Right.
We do make a statement in our report that should that happen, the CRA has stated that they will come back to the committee and have to review, sit down and take another look at the budget and come back with those recommendations on how to address this issue. Again, on the CLA's end, we have been working with the California League of Cities and monitoring this particular proposal in Sacramento. And what we're learning at the moment, and I think I'm not sure what the CRA is hearing, but it hasn't been something that is being proposed at the moment. Nobody has really brought it forward to the floor. Nobody has, so again, we are looking at it, and should we have to take some action on the council side, we will prepare a resolution and bring it forward to the council. But we are looking and monitoring this particular proposal.
And Councilman Cardenas, just to be even more specific, if we did have a hit like that, we would send the regional administrators back out to meet with every council member's office and talk about it. And really, the way we do budget anyway, every regional administrator was directed to meet with the council member's office, and if possible, the council member directly, to go through each line item in the budget. So if we had to figure out how to deal with a 5% hit, we'd send everybody else out one more time and sit down with you and figure out how we can do this, and then come back together and make an allocation based on all that input.
Now, these tax dollars, the bottom line is the state has the authority, unfortunately, they remain with the authority to make these arbitrary cuts or impacts on our tax dollars. That's because they pass through the state, or it's because they just have the authority to reach back down and say, that money doesn't belong to you anymore.
That would be the latter, as I understand it.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cardenas. Leslie?
Leslie's coming up. It's your lucky day, Leslie.
Leslie works directly, well, she has a lot of jobs, but she works directly with Council District 10, so I just wanted you to identify yourself so anybody that's listening on the squawk box can hear your voice.
So they'll know I'm here?
Yes, I want them to know that you're here and on the job.
Okay. My name is Leslie Lambert. I'm the Regional Administrator for the Hollywood and Central Region,
All right.
Including the great 10th district.
Yeah.
including the Great 10th District.
But she's doing a phenomenal job. Thank you all very much. So with that said, yeah, I had to get my person on the record. So with that said, without objection, on item 7A, we'll adopt the joint CLA-CAO report with the amendments.
Yeah.
On item 7B, we'll receive and file the CRA report, and on item 7C, we will adopt the motion, and that will occur as a communique. Well, is there something, you have that look in your eye, Ms. Barclay.
Just really quickly, a couple of technical adjustments have been made to the amendment, and those have been provided to the clerk as well. The agency has provided some information in response to Councilmember Perry's questions relative to the Central Business District redevelopment project area. That information has been provided to the clerk and attached to the file.
Okay, so those will then be included as additional amendments. All right, then, with that said, we'll move forward on that as a communique from the chair. Is there any more business before this committee, Ms. Barclay?
No, sir.
Then this committee is adjourned.